What happened when an undercover CEO discovered the shocking truth behind his own ice cream parlor? Hello, amazing listeners. Today, we bring you an unforgettable story of leadership, compassion, and redemption. Maxwell Carter, the owner of the Frosted Bliss ice cream chain, went undercover to investigate complaints of poor management and mistreatment at one of his parlors. What he uncovered was far worse than he imagined: exploitation, negligence, and broken spirits. But instead of turning away, Maxwell took bold action to transform his business and empower those who deserved better. Stay tuned for this powerful journey of change and justice. Maxwell Carter, a seasoned entrepreneur in his early 40s, stared at his laptop screen, his fingers drumming rhythmically against the sleek, polished surface of his desk. The email before him was just one of several recent complaints about one of his Frosted Bliss ice cream parlors, a popular chain he had built from the ground up over the last decade. Maxwell had always prided himself on creating a welcoming, family-friendly environment where quality service and customer satisfaction were prioritized. Yet, lately, something had gone terribly wrong at the parlor, located in the bustling seaside town of Harborview Bay. The most recent complaint left a sour taste in his mouth. A customer had been turned away for attempting to pay with coins, an incident that Maxwell found both frustrating and deeply embarrassing. His vision for Frosted Bliss had never included such arrogance or disregard for patrons, but this issue was just the tip of the iceberg. The complaints had been piling up: rude service, understaffing, poor cleanliness, and allegations of management manipulating payroll. It painted a grim picture, one Maxwell couldn't ignore. He rubbed his temples, recalling his last conversation with Jessica, his regional supervisor. She had assured him that Brandon, the manager of the problematic location, had the situation under control, but Maxwell wasn't convinced. He had trusted Jessica to oversee his chain's performance, and now, seeing the persistent complaints, he questioned whether she had taken his concerns seriously. Frustration tightened his chest, but beneath it all, a flicker of determination stirred. It wasn't like him to sit back and accept half-hearted explanations. Maxwell had built Frosted Bliss on principles of integrity and quality service. If something was tarnishing that reputation, he would root it out himself. The idea came to him suddenly, like a flash of lightning across a stormy sea. If Brandon was covering things up, then Maxwell would need to see the truth for himself. But not as the owner, everyone knew. Instead, Maxwell would go undercover. With 15 locations spread across the state, most employees had never seen him in person, especially since he rarely visited the Harborview Bay parlor. It was the perfect opportunity to step into the shoes of a regular employee, without the weight of his name influencing how people acted around him. Besides, he had changed a lot since his early days. His hair was a bit grayer, his build leaner, and his demeanor sharpened by years of experience. A fake name, a scruffy beard, and some worn-out clothes would ensure no one suspected a thing. Decision made, Maxwell closed his laptop and rose from his chair. The plan was simple: pose as a desperate job seeker named Ben Harper, get hired at the parlor, and find out what was really going on. If there was exploitation or negligence, he would expose it. And if Brandon had been exploiting the business he worked so hard to build, there would be consequences. The next morning, Maxwell stood before the faded storefront of the Frosted Bliss parlor in Harborview Bay, wearing an old hoodie, ripped jeans, and a weary expression that had nothing to do with disguise. With his heart pounding, he pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. The investigation had begun. Maxwell Carter stepped into the Frosted Bliss parlor under the guise of Ben Harper, a scruffy, down-on-his-luck man looking for work. He wore a threadbare hoodie over a faded t-shirt, paired with worn-out jeans and scuffed sneakers. His once neatly groomed beard was now a tangled mess, giving him the appearance of someone desperate for employment, rather than the successful owner of the very establishment he was about to investigate. The interior of the parlor looked clean enough at first glance, but there was a hollowness in the air, an uneasy sense that something was fundamentally off. Brandon, the parlor manager, barely glanced at Maxwell before tossing a wrinkled, oversized Frosted Bliss polo shirt his way. "You the new guy?" Brandon grunted, his tone laced with irritation. Maxwell nodded, keeping his expression humble and his voice rougher than usual. "Yeah, my name's Ben." Brandon's eyes swept over him once, dismissive and uninterested. "Great, get in the back and start sorting the deliveries, and if you're done with that, wipe down the tables. If I need you, I'll yell." Maxwell compiled without complaint, making his way through the parlor's narrow corridors until he reached the storage room. The place was a disaster. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, some crushed and sagging under the weight of others. Expired ingredients were shoved into corners, forgotten in collected dust. It was clear that cleanliness and organization were not priorities under Brandon's watch. Maxwell's eyes narrowed as he noted the poor conditions. How could Jessica have missed something so obvious? The hours dragged on as Maxwell went through the motions of his menial tasks, his muscles aching from the constant lifting and sorting. But he welcomed the discomfort. It was a stark reminder of what the staff at this location had to endure daily. All the while, Brandon remained mostly holed up in his office, barking orders through the door but rarely stepping out to help or even observe the employees he supposedly managed. Maxwell's disguise was working. Brandon had no idea who he truly was, and that anonymity allowed Maxwell to see the parlor's inner workings with unfiltered clarity. As he continued his tasks, Maxwell's resolve hardened. Whatever was wrong with this place, he intended to expose it. As Maxwell settled into his role as Ben Harper, the new hire, he quickly became acquainted with the small team of overworked employees desperately trying to keep the parlor afloat. The most notable among them was Sophie, a friendly young woman in her mid-20s with auburn hair pulled into a neat ponytail. Despite the chaos and stress surrounding her, Sophie carried herself with an unwavering kindness that Maxwell found both impressive and heartbreaking. From behind the counter, she managed to juggle multiple tasks, scooping ice cream, greeting customers, and handling payment, without ever losing her genuine smile. "Hey, you must be the new guy. I'm Sophie. Shout if you need help figuring things out," she said, with an encouraging grin, her eyes glancing over Maxwell's ill-fitting uniform. Her voice was bright, but there was a tiredness beneath it that Maxwell could see plainly. Over the next few hours, Maxwell observed how Sophie's attentiveness extended beyond her work responsibilities. She was the only one who seemed to notice when customers struggled to decide on flavors or when children became fussy and impatient. Her ability to keep the parlor's atmosphere pleasant and welcoming was nothing short of remarkable. Yet, Sophie's dedication did not come without a price. Maxwell noticed how Brandon frequently criticized her for minor things, wasting time chatting with customers, moving too slowly when serving, or failing to clean the counters to his exacting standards. Sophie never argued back, only nodding with an apologetic smile that Maxwell suspected was more about survival than agreement. It became apparent that Brandon's disdain wasn't just reserved for Sophie. The other staff members, Isaac and Chloe, were also subjected to his abrupt commands and impossible expectations. Isaac, a college student working part-time, looked perpetually exhausted. He often stumbled over orders, his hands shaking slightly whenever Brandon's sharp voice cut through the air. Chloe, a high school senior balancing school and work, tried her best to keep up but frequently found herself in tears during her breaks. Maxwell's presence as a new hire went mostly ignored by Brandon, but the staff treated him with cautious friendliness, their spirits evidently weighed down by their manager's oppressive leadership. During one of Sophie's rare breaks, Maxwell struck up a conversation with her. "Seems like you do most of the heavy lifting around here," he remarked casually. Sophie laughed, but the sound lacked warmth. "Somebody's got to, right? Otherwise Brandon will find a way to dock my hours." She shook her head, her frustration momentarily breaking through her calm demeanor. "He's got this place running on fumes. Everyone's too scared to complain, and those who do, well, they don't last long." Maxwell's brow furrowed as Sophie's words sank in. The parlor wasn't just suffering from neglect. It was actively being undermined by Brandon's toxic management. He made a mental note to keep a close eye on Sophie and the other employees. Their loyalty to the parlor, despite the mistreatment, was evident. But loyalty alone wouldn't be enough to save them from Brandon's destructive influence. As Maxwell continued his undercover investigation, he realized his task was growing more complicated by the minute. Maxwell's undercover work at the Frosted Bliss parlor continued, his tasks ranging from cleaning tables to restocking the freezers with tubs of ice cream. The more he observed, the clearer it became that Brandon's negligence extended far beyond poor management. It was outright exploitation. One evening, while cleaning up after a particularly chaotic rush of customers, Maxwell ventured back into the storage room to retrieve more napkins. As he shifted a stack of heavy boxes, his foot nudged something soft. Pushing the boxes aside, he uncovered a small corner arranged into a makeshift sleeping area. There was a thin, frayed blanket neatly folded atop a flattened cardboard box, accompanied by a worn backpack and a pair of scuffed sneakers. The sight unsettled him. Who would be desperate enough to sleep here? His question was answered later that night when Maxwell, deliberately lingering after hours, heard cautious footsteps approaching the storage room. He pressed himself against a row of shelves, watching as a teenager crept into the corner Maxwell had uncovered. The boy looked about 16, his hair unkempt and dark circles shadowing his eyes. With a sigh of relief, the boy collapsed onto the makeshift bed, shoulders sagging as if carrying a weight too heavy for his frame. Maxwell stepped forward, his voice low and careful. "Hey." The teenager bolted upright, eyes wide and panicked. I'm sorry. I'll leave, I swear. Just don't call the cops." His voice trembled, desperation etched into every word. Maxwell raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Relax, kid. I'm not here to throw you out. Just wanted to know who's been staying here." The boy hesitated, his gaze flitting between Maxwell and the exit. Finally he mumbled, "My name's Liam. I've been crashing here for a few weeks. Nowhere else to go." Maxwell's heart clenched at the admission. A homeless teenager, forced to hide in the dingy storage room of an ice cream parlor just to find a place to sleep. But what came next angered him more. Liam explained that Brandon had caught him sleeping there once, but instead of offering help or reporting it to someone who could, Brandon had made a twisted deal. As long as Liam cleaned up the parlor after closing and helped restock the freezers, he was allowed to stay. Unpaid, unacknowledged, and unseen. It was exploitation at its most blatant, preying on the desperation of a child with nowhere else to go. The more Liam spoke, the clearer the picture became. Brandon wasn't just neglectful, he was using Liam as free labor while also cutting paid hours for regular employees like Sophie. Maxwell's jaw tightened with each word. This was worse than he had anticipated. What Brandon was doing wasn't just unethical, it was downright cruel. The discovery solidified Maxwell's determination to dismantle Brandon's abusive regime and restore the parlor to what it was meant to be, a place of warmth, respect, and opportunity. But before he could make things right, Maxwell knew he needed to gather more evidence. And above all, he needed to make sure Liam wasn't just brushed aside as another casualty of Brandon's greed. Maxwell's patience wore thin as the days dragged on, each new revelation painting a bleaker picture of the parlor's reality. Brandon's neglect was evident not only through the exploited labor of Liam, but also through his systematic mistreatment of regular employees. Sophie's complaints about having her hours unfairly slashed weren't exaggerations. Maxwell confirmed through casual conversations with Isaac and Chloe that Brandon frequently manipulated the schedule to punish those who dared to question him. His strategy was as predictable as it was ruthless. Anyone who spoke out about the chaotic management or unfair treatment found their hours reduced or cut entirely. The parlor's high turnover rate suddenly made sense, and Maxwell's frustration intensified with every passing day. But it wasn't until Maxwell witnessed Brandon's cruelty firsthand that he finally decided enough was enough. Late one evening, as the parlor was closing, Sophie was struggling to balance the register after a particularly busy shift. Brandon emerged from his office, his expression twisted into a sneer. "Still counting? What the hell's taking you so long?" he snapped, his voice sharp and grating. Sophie flinched but continued her work, her hands trembling as she tried to explain a discrepancy in the day's earnings. I'm sorry, Brandon. It's just that the register was acting up earlier and—" "I don't want excuses," Brandon barked. "You screw up, you lose hours. Simple as that." He turned his back on her, retreating into his office without another word. Sophie's shoulders slumped, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. Watching the exchange, Maxwell clenched his fists, his rage simmering just below the surface. He had seen enough. When the next morning arrived, Maxwell didn't bother with his disguise. Dressed in a clean, tailored shirt and jeans, he entered the parlor with the quiet authority of someone who had made up his mind. Brandon was slouched behind the counter, scrawling through his phone, paying no attention to the customers or employees bustling around him. "Brandon," Maxwell called out, his voice steady and sharp. Brandon looked up, his brows knitting together in confusion. "Who are you?" "Maxwell Carter. I own this chain." The room fell silent, every employee's gaze snapping toward Maxwell in shock. Sophie froze, her eyes wide with disbelief, while Liam peeked nervously from the back room. Brandon's expression morphed from confusion to panic in an instant. "Wait, what? You're not... Who?" "That's right," Maxwell cut him off. "I've been here for days, watching you neglect your duties, exploit a homeless teenager for free labor, and manipulate schedules to maintain your own bonuses. Your time here is over." Maxwell's words were delivered with a calm finality that left no room for argument. Brandon sputtered, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. I can explain." "No," Maxwell interrupted, his gaze cold and unwavering. "There's nothing you can say that justifies what you've done. Pack your things. You're fired." Brandon stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, before storming off toward the office to gather his belongings. As the door slammed behind him, Maxwell let out a slow, controlled breath. The confrontation was over, but his work had only just begun. With Brandon gone, Maxwell wasted no time initiating the changes necessary to rebuild the Parlor from the ground up. His first call was to Jessica, his regional supervisor, who arrived within an hour, her face pale and drawn when she learned of Brandon's termination. Maxwell's tone was firm but controlled as he explained everything he had uncovered: Brandon's manipulation of payroll, his blatant exploitation of Liam, and his utter disregard for employee well-being. "This isn't just about firing one bad manager," Maxwell told her, his eyes hard. "It's about making sure nothing like this slips through the cracks again. From now on, accountability will be more than just a word." Jessica nodded, her shoulders tense. She promised to initiate a thorough review of the Parlor's operations and to inspect the other branches under her supervision. Maxwell made it clear that this was not a request, it was a directive. As Jessica left to begin her investigation, Maxwell turned his attention to the people who truly mattered: the employees. He found Sophie in the back room, her hands clutching a stack of schedules like a lifeline. "You've been holding this place together," Maxwell said, his voice softening. "I'd like you to step up as manager." Sophie blinked, her mouth opening and closing in stunned silence. "Me? But I don't have any management experience." Maxwell shook his head with a reassuring smile. "You don't need experience fixing spreadsheets. You need to know how to treat people right, and you've been doing that all along. This place needs someone who cares." She stared at him, her eyes glistening with a mixture of fear and hope. After a moment, she nodded. "I'll do it. I won't let you down." Maxwell nodded back, his confidence in her absolute. From there, he moved swiftly. He reinstated the hours that Brandon had unfairly cut from Sophie, Isaac, and Chloe, ensuring their wages reflected the effort they put into keeping the Parlor running. But there was still one more person who needed his help: Liam. And Maxwell intended to make things right for the boy who had been forced to work for nothing. It was time to give him a real chance. Once the immediate chaos of Brandon's firing had settled, Maxwell turned his attention to Liam. The boy had been hiding in the storage room ever since the confrontation, his nerves frayed from weeks of living in fear of discovery. Maxwell found him curled up in the corner, his shoulders hunched defensively, his gaze wary and distrustful. "Liam," Maxwell began gently, crouching down to meet the teenager's eyes. "You don't have to hide anymore. Brandon's gone. I made sure of it." Liam's expression remained guarded, suspicion etched into his features. "So, what now? You kick me out too?" Maxwell shook his head, his voice steady and sincere. "No, I'm here to help you. What Brandon did was wrong. Exploiting you for free labor when you need real support. That's unacceptable." Liam's defensive posture relaxed just a fraction, his eyes flickering with something that resembled hope. "I don't need charity," Liam muttered, though his voice trembled with exhaustion. I needed somewhere safe to sleep." "I understand," Maxwell replied, his tone filled with empathy. "But you deserve better than a dusty storage room and a manager who takes advantage of you. I've already spoken to someone at Harborview Youth Shelter. They have a place for you to stay, with meals, counseling, and even job training programs if you're interested." Liam's eyes widened, disbelief overtaking his doubt. You do that?" "Because no one should have to go through what you've been dealing with," Maxwell said firmly. "You've been working hard, even if Brandon never acknowledged it. I'd like to offer you a real job here at Frosted Bliss, with proper training and pay, But more importantly, I want you to have a chance to rebuild without having to look over your shoulder." Liam swallowed hard, his eyes glassy with emotions he had been holding back for too long. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything now," Maxwell assured him. "Just think about it. If you decide you're ready, the door's open." After a long pause, Liam nodded slowly. It wasn't a definitive answer, but it was enough for Maxwell. The boy's struggle wasn't over, but at least now, he wouldn't have to face it alone. With Brandon gone and Liam's situation addressed, Maxwell turned his full attention to rebuilding the Frosted Bliss parlor from the inside out. He spent the following days working closely with Sophie, who had reluctantly but earnestly stepped into her new role as manager. Despite her initial doubts, Sophie quickly proved herself to be a natural leader. Her kindness, patience, and genuine concern for the well-being of her colleagues made her a guiding light in the aftermath of Brandon's toxic regime. She worked tirelessly, restructuring schedules to ensure that Isaac, Chloe, and the other employees received fair hours and compensation. Where Brandon had once wielded the schedule as a tool of punishment, Sophie used it to empower and support her team. Maxwell admired Sophie's dedication, but he knew that restoring the parlor's integrity required more than just good intentions. The physical state of the parlor itself was a reflection of Brandon's neglect. Supplies were disorganized, expired ingredients cluttered the storage room, and essential equipment had been left in disrepair. Determined to set things right, Maxwell authorized a full inventory overhaul. Broken freezers were repaired, outdated equipment was replaced, and cleanliness standards were raised to the level he had always envisioned for Frosted Bliss. Jessica, the regional supervisor, visited regularly to ensure compliance and report on progress. Maxwell kept her on a short leash, making it clear that her oversight failures wouldn't be overlooked. Accountability had to start at the top. But Maxwell's efforts went beyond material fixes. He held a meeting with the employees, encouraging them to voice their concerns and share their experiences without fear of retaliation. It was an emotional session, with Isaac admitting he had nearly quit due to Brandon's bullying, and Chloe revealing how she dreaded coming to work because of the constant fear of losing her hours. Maxwell listened carefully, acknowledging their pain and promising real change. It was the first step in rebuilding trust, but Maxwell knew actions would speak louder than words. Sophie implemented new customer service standards, training the staff to handle difficult customers with professionalism and empathy. She also introduced employee feedback forms to ensure their voices would be heard. As weeks passed, the changes became evident. Customers began to notice the improved service, their smiles now met with genuine warmth rather than forced politeness. Sophie's leadership revitalized the team's morale, and with Maxwell's ongoing support, the parlor flourished. Even Liam, who had initially declined Maxwell's offer of a job, returned one afternoon, cautiously inquiring if the position was still available. Maxwell welcomed him with open arms, providing the boy with proper training and fair pay. Maxwell couldn't help but feel a deep sense of pride as he observed Sophie instructing Liam on how to handle the ice cream machines with patience and care. The once neglected parlor was now a place of renewal, its transformation a testament to the resilience and dedication of those who worked within its walls. But Maxwell knew his work wasn't finished. There were more parlors to check, more employees to support, and a promise to himself that he intended to keep. This was just the beginning. The transformation of the Frosted Bliss parlor was nothing short of remarkable. Under Sophie's compassionate and diligent leadership, the parlor blossomed into the welcoming, family-friendly establishment Maxwell had always envisioned. Her natural ability to connect with customers and motivate her team brought a renewed sense of purpose to everyone involved. Isaac, now working consistent hours without fear of retaliation, visibly thrived under Sophie's guidance. Chloe, too, seemed rejuvenated, her nerves replaced with the confidence that her work was finally appreciated. Maxwell continued to check in frequently, offering guidance and reassurance, but ultimately allowing Sophie to make her own decisions and cultivate her own management style. Jessica's oversight, previously lax and riddled with negligence, became more structured and hands-on. Maxwell held her accountable for her past failures, but he also gave her the opportunity to learn from her mistakes. She responded with newfound dedication, auditing the other parlors under her supervision and ensuring that no other employees faced the same exploitation that Liam had endured. Maxwell's insistence on transparency and open communication began to ripple through the entire Frosted Bliss chain, sparking positive changes that went far beyond the single parlor in Harborview Bay. For Liam, the journey was more challenging. He struggled to adjust to his newfound stability, the weight of his past clinging to him like a shadow. But with Sophie's patience and Maxwell's unwavering support, he slowly began to find his footing. Maxwell made sure Liam's hours were flexible, allowing him to attend programs at the Harborview Youth Shelter, designed to help young people build essential life skills and prepare for future employment. More importantly, Maxwell treated Liam with respect, something the boy had rarely experienced from adults. Gradually, Liam's distrust softened into cautious gratitude and eventually genuine attachment. One quiet afternoon, as the sun bathed the parlor in golden light, Liam approached Maxwell with an earnest expression. "I just wanted to say thanks for everything. Nobody's ever tried to actually help me before." Maxwell smiled, the warmth of Liam's words cutting through the weariness that had accumulated over the past weeks. "You earned this, Liam. All I did was open the door. You're the one who chose to walk through it." The parlor's reputation flourished alongside its employees' growth. Customers praised the friendly, attentive service, and Sophie's managerial style became a model for the other parlors within the chain. Maxwell's undercover experience had exposed critical flaws in his management structure, but more importantly, it had reignited his passion for the business he had built from the ground up. He had seen firsthand the impact of good leadership and the importance of staying connected to the people who made Frosted Bliss thrive. As he prepared to leave Harborview Bay and continue his investigations at other locations, Maxwell left Sophie with a promise. "I'll be back to check in, and if you ever need anything, you call me directly." Sophie grinned, her newfound confidence shining through. "You'll regret saying that. I might just call every day." Maxwell laughed, his heart light as he walked out the door. There was more work to be done, but for the first time in a long while he felt truly optimistic. He had reclaimed not just his business, but also his sense of purpose, and he wouldn't let anything threaten that again. The story of Maxwell Carter's undercover investigation at Frosted Bliss teaches a powerful lesson about leadership, empathy, and accountability. True leadership isn't about delegating tasks from a distance. It's about understanding the struggles of those you lead and taking direct action to address their concerns. Maxwell's journey highlights the importance of valuing employees, recognizing their potential, and providing opportunities for growth. By confronting exploitation and fostering a supportive work environment, he transforms his business into something greater than just profit. The lesson is clear. Leadership built on compassion, fairness, and genuine care leads to lasting success and loyalty.